Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this session. Tonight, we celebrate the life and accomplishments of a scholar, professor, mentor, advisor, friend, husband, father, and a great regional scientist, Sid Saltzman. Um, Sid is a member of the original Big Four, as I call it, along with Walter Isaac, who doesn't need introduction in this conference, Stan Chimansky and Barclay Jones founded the Cornell Digital Science Program back in the early 1970s. Kieran Donaghy from Cornell University, my co-panelist in this session, is going to talk more about his scholarly achievement, but maybe I'll say a few words about the lighter side of Sid, before we talk more about the serious stuff. Sid likes his coffee. So this was maybe not the last time, but pretty close to the last time I saw him in Ithaca, December 2017. And he wanted me to take him to this coffee place in Trip Hammer Mall, just a mall nearby, Kendall Retirement House, the place that he stayed with his wife, Lori, until he passed away in September of this year. So this is Ithaca Bakery, and we had a good chat. And so it's at that moment that he told me that he just turned 91. And I was quite surprised. That's it. You don't look like you're 91. You look like you're 71. And he had reminded me, come on, Yuri, you sometimes look like you're 17. Oh, touche. So he likes to tell jokes and have fun in his own way. And this is proof here of a couple of things. One is that I actually did finish my dissertation back in the early 2000s, and Sid actually was the chair of my dissertation committee.
There I am.
Sid has one of the most distinctive signatures, as you can see that, at the top, maybe surpassed only by my second advisor, Iwan Aziz, who is here as well. A very interesting signature. And I think Jose is here with us as well tonight. This is not a book by Sid Saltzman, but you can see his signature at the top. I actually inherited this book from him when I came back to teach at Cornell as an adjunct in 2004, 2005. And I was asking him for advice, how to go about and do my teaching. And this is the book that he gave me. And I think I get the hint, to teach with a sense of humor, and try to make the class more exciting, perhaps, for my students. So I learned a lot from him, not just in terms of pure scholarly, scientific achievement, but also how to actually teach, to the audience who are not necessarily interested in the serious regional science stuff. Another book that this is another picture of us. Another book that I inherited from him back in 2004 is this classic, implant manual, version 2.0, 2000 version. Implant, as many of you know, is the industry standard for input-output analysis now. And I was taking over his class at the time on methods of a regional economic impact analysis. And this is the book that he gave me. And I was actually quite surprised. I thought, wow, this is a very valuable book. Why did you give me this book? No, I didn't get an answer until much later. When I found out that it's actually a library book. So he and I are now partners in crime for not returning a library book to the Cornell Fine Arts Collection. But that's a great manual here and a good memory too. And it's really a great privilege to take over the course that Sid taught for many decades for the Cornell Regional Science Program. I think most of all, in my memory, Sid is just the one of the kindest persons, the kindest of the kindest, if I can say that, a person that I have ever known. Back in the late 2000s, 2009, 2010, I thought I was just all set, to finish my teaching career in Asia. But Sid, along with Iwan and of course Kieran, also were instrumental in bringing me back, to this country and to Cornell, and basically rejuvenated, both my research as well as my teaching. So I owe, everything here to Sid, not just as an advisor, for my thesis, as a source of inspiration, but also, as somebody who showed me the pathway, how to succeed as an academic, but also as a human being. I think the one thing that he really inspired me for is that he showed me, what is possible. When I first came here in the 1990s, as somebody who could barely speak English, at that time, nobody would have predicted that someday, I would end up, right here as a faculty member. And I think Sid showed me, as a son of a Jewish immigrant, he showed me what is possible in this country. If I work hard and dedicate and put my energy and focus, I could actually, succeed as a faculty and as somebody who actually contributes, to regional science. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor to my co-host, Kieran Donaghy from Cornell University.
Okay, thank you, Yuri. I'm going to try to get my screen up here. Yes, there we are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
We'll see you.
Okay, so my role as assigned by Yuri is to basically provide a bio sketch of Sid and give a basic timeline of the things that he did, and I'll also share one personal anecdote. So you can see that Sid was born in 1926, but he finished his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering at the ripe old age of 20. So it was clear that he was destined for good things. And then
Kieran, I'm sorry, I'm not able to see your slide yet.
Okay. Let's see. Hold on just a second. Let's see. How about now?
It's starting. It's starting. Okay, great.
Okay. So let's go back to that and let's go. So there's Sid. And as you can tell from Yuri's remarks, there's always a light in Sid's eyes, or laughter in his eyes. He was a lighthearted fellow, and as serious as the issues that he analyzed, he remained grounded and easygoing. So as I said before, Sid completed his studies in mechanical engineering for a bachelor's degree in 1946 at the age of 20, and then went on to do a master's work at Columbia University, completing his degree there in '51, and then 8 years later, he had a PhD in engineering at Cornell. And in between acquiring his master's degree and his doctorate, Sid worked as an engineer, a production planner, and as an operations research and systems analyst in New York City. And what's interesting to me about his background here is that many people come to regional science from different backgrounds, and surely his was very strong in engineering and operations research. After completing his doctoral studies, he was immediately hired by the Department of Operations Research and Industrial Engineering, where he worked for 5 years, and the latter 2 of those he spent as the assistant director of the Office of Computer Services at Cornell. And then in 1968, he joined the faculty of the Department of Policy Planning and Regional Analysis as an associate professor with tenure. Now, this was at a time when the Department of City and Regional Planning was bifurcated. So it split into those people doing policy analysis and those doing urban planning and analysis. And he was promoted to the rank of full professor in 1971, and he remained in that department for the next 4 years. And then when the 2 departments were brought back together again, he was a professor of city and regional planning from 1975 through 2009. And in 2009, he was promoted to the rank of professor emeritus. Sid was widely admired and respected and seen as someone with great integrity and wisdom, and could manage a fractious faculty. And so he was the chair of the Department of Policy and Planning and Regional Analysis for 1 year, and then became the chair of the Department of City and Regional Planning for the next 7. So that was an important role for him to play. Among the awards and achievements that he attained were a NATO Science Faculty Fellowship in 1974. He had 2 National Science Foundation grants in 67, 68, and 73 through 75. And he was a senior fellow at Mathematica Policy Research in Washington, where he did a number of interesting and important systems analyses of various problems. He published many papers in a broad variety of journals and chapters in books, but perhaps his 2 most notable were a book that he co-authored with Dick Schuler, who also died recently, on the future of electrical energy, a regional perspective of an industry in transition. And I'm hoping that Tim Mount will say a bit about the importance of that work in the energy policy of New York State. And then also the book he co-authored with Matt Drennan, Ron Miller, Iwan Aziz, Walter Izard, and Eric Thorbeck, Methods of Regional and Interregional Analysis, and that's held up pretty well over the last 22 years. Sid had diverse research interests, regional modeling, regional science, more broadly, economic development, and public policy analysis in the US and abroad. And he had a very deep toolbox that he could draw upon to do both statistical and econometric analyses, as well as operation research techniques, and was always good at finding the right tool for the job. Some other interests that he held were in teaching and lecturing, and he did those activities and consulted in various countries. And he also co-organized some major conferences and workshops on energy planning, large-scale social science models, regional science, and spatial econometrics. I can remember well the big conference we had out at the University of Illinois in 1989, where we were exploring ways of using supercomputing to get at a number of problems we otherwise could not access. So as Yuri said, back in 1972, Sid played a vital role along with Stan Szymanski, Walter Izard, and Barclay Jones in organizing the graduate field of regional science. And that was under the administrative auspices of the Department of City and Regional Planning. And he taught in that program until his retirement 37 years later. And when I arrived back in 2007 to return to work in the program, Sid said to me, "You got here just in time, kid." He'd been working so long in the trenches. And between 1990 and 2008, he served on 26 doctoral committees, including as a chair and a minor member. 16 were in regional science, but his diversity was such that he also served on committees in planning, bioeconomics, engineering, and other fields. I'd just like to relate a particular anecdote, which I think speaks to the generosity of spirit that Sid had. In the spring of 1997, I was teaching at the University of Delaware, and I had finished my dissertation research, but I hadn't written up all of the work. And on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, the Dean of the College of Urban Affairs and Public Policy came into my office and he said, "Kieran, we'd love to keep you, but unless you have your dissertation defended, accepted, and deposited by April 15th, we're going to have to let you go." Well, at the time, my advisor, Stan Szymanski, was retired and was living in Israel, and we didn't have Zoom back then. So that night I called up Sid and I laid before him my plight, and I didn't realize that he had been very ill and had major surgery and suffered a minor heart attack. And he listened to my story and he said, "I sympathize with you, kid, but I just can't do it. I simply am not healthy enough." And so I thanked him and hung up the phone. And the next day he called up and said, "Kieran, how are we going to get this done?" And I knew he was on my side. And we did get it done. I wrote the dissertation in 3 weeks. My wife typed it up, and I drove it up to Ithaca. We defended it on Good Friday of that year. Sid sat with me and we made the corrections. Helena Wood typed up the changes, and it was deposited on April 15th. And he called my dean to say, "Keep that man in harness." And so I retained my job, and Sid helped me to go on to the career that I've enjoyed. And so that's my story. We now have a number of other speakers who have requested to make remarks about Sid. And so this is a suggested lineup, and perhaps we could start with Eric and then move down the list. So I'll stop there, Yuri.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kieran. I am addressing you and saluting you from the part of the Redwood country, which is my secondary residence. I'm not in Ithaca. And I just would like to share with you some of my memories about Sid. And perhaps my most vivid memories of Sid go back to the many regional science PhD committee on which we sat jointly. Kieran has shown the large number of committees that Sid chaired. And I must say, over a period of about 3 decades, there must have been at least about 24 of them that we set on together. And this includes the pre-dissertation qualifying examination and thesis defense in regional science. Sid was invariably cool, calm, collected towards the students. And compared to other examiners, he was relatively quiet and gentle. His questions and interventions were always fair. At times, one got the impression that he was trying to help put students at ease and perhaps even become their advocate rather than their critique. He always carried himself with an inner humility that endeared him to students and colleagues. Kieran mentioned Walter Izard, and this reminds me that during my tenure as chairman of the economics department at Cornell, and this was in the second half of the 1970s, Walter Izard came to see me. And it appeared that the University of Pennsylvania, where he taught, was not supportive of a new initiative that he had in mind, which was to broaden and expand the scope of regional science to include what he called peace science. And he asked me if I would support his dream and arrange for a part-time appointment at Cornell in the economics department. I managed to do so, and I know that Sid, more than anyone else, became instrumental in his wholehearted support of Walter to become involved in the Department of City and Regional Planning, where the program on regional science was launched. For a long time, Walter and Sid were the mainspring of regional science at Cornell, as well as nationally and internationally. Sid always operated in a quiet and gentle way. I do not ever recall him raising his voice. He was a true gentleman and will be greatly missed by the regional science community and all his friends and colleagues. Dear Sid, we thank you profoundly for your professionalism, your kindness, and your empathy. Above all, we shall miss your wisdom. And that completes my remarks.
Thank you very much, Eric. Eric, along with us, Sid, and Walter Izard, of course, and Matt Drannon is here also in the audience, wrote this book here, Methods of Interregional and Regional Analysis. That is the last book that Sid wrote in the late 1990s. So now I'm going to invite the author, who's the second in this list, Professor Iwan Aziz, who is also my a former advisor. Professor Iwan.
Thank you, Yuri. What can I say about Sid? I and my wife felt so lucky to have met Sid and Laurie, and we became not only just close friends, but it's more than that. Okay, and to me, the most striking, and I'm pretty sure all of you here agree with me, the most striking thing about Sid was his super kindness to everyone, as if making any problem seems to disappear after a few minutes you talk with Sid. He is one of the finest and kindest human being I've ever come across. And I was so lucky that I can have shared an office room with him for several years, as a matter of fact, because from the interaction I had with him, I can learn a lot from his intellectual minds, his humor, but above all is his wit and wisdom. To me, those are something to be cherished about Sid. And one thing that is really stuck in, not only in my mind, but also in my wife's mind, is that when we look back at what happened in early 1990s, after my wife finished her PhD, at that time, we were about to leave Cornell, but many things happened. But I am 100% sure that one of the things that made us making the decision to stay at Cornell was Sid, and of course, Laurie. And there are so many good stories and experiences that I and my family had with Sid. Of course, I cannot tell all the stories here, but few of the stories cannot escape from my memory. And let me share one of them here. You know, when we came here, my son was only a few months old, and Sid and Laurie were kindly enough to invite us to stay in their home. And, you know, we just flew 10,000 miles. So naturally, three of us really had the jet lag. especially my boy, who is only, I think he was 5 or 6 months old at that time. So in the middle of the night, he cried. And I felt so bad to Sid and Laurie because, you know, we just arrived and then we disturb their sleeping actually. So I tried to take out my kids to go out and walk in his stroller outside Sid's house and so forth. And then the next morning, I tried to apologize to Sid and Laurie. But Sid, with his soft word and calmness, he said, "Oh no, Iwan, we thank you because we were thinking how lucky we were that we didn't have to do what you had to do that night." So it shows his humor and his super kindness actually. And that stick in my mind, and my wife keep talking about that actually. And to me, he is more just a friend. He is a brother, a father, a mentor, and he is also advisor in many different ways, not only in academic matters. And I remember when I travel a couple of times with him, both within the US as well as internationally. He always came up with something which I never thought before, seemingly simple things, but it was so deep that I remember several times after having conversation with him, it gave me some ideas about what to explore in my next research. And to me, that is highly valuable. It's not so much that he gave the answer to very difficult question, but at least he sort of opened the door in terms of what aspect to be explored and so forth. So he is a truly mentor and advisor from that standpoint. And Yuri mentioned about he likes to have a coffee. Exactly. And I think we are talking about exactly the same place because, you know, every time I arrive from my international travel, which was very often, at least once a year, he always asked me to go to the same spot, to the same coffee shop. And he claimed that he would like to hear from me what's going on around the world and, you know, what are the new things that he can learn and things like that. Of course, at the end of the conversation, about an hour or 2 hours conversation, it was I who learned a lot from him, especially his wisdom. But what strikes me is that when we were talking about both domestic within the US political issues as well as international political issues, he always came up with something which I never thought before. I mean, it was not like, you know, something that you can easily read in the media or something. So to me, something about Sid that he can see things which we normally do not see. And that's why I was not surprised whenever I had the discussions with him about few things. He always came up with something that led me to explore something new. So I'm really grateful. And when we travel abroad, it shows that he was so tolerant, he was so understanding about different culture. I remember when he gave a talk at the Minister of Finance, uh, he immediately understood that after he spoke for 15 minutes, some of the audience, some of the members in the audience did not really clearly understand what he said. And he came, so he physically came, approached to those people, and he tried to explain as if he was, you know, standing in front of the classroom. And you can imagine these are all, you know, bureaucrats, people working in the Ministry of Finance. And after the session, you cannot imagine all those people were so grateful and so thankful to Sid for explaining things in a very clear manner, and it's always encouraging. And I'm not surprised because with all the students, like what Kiran and Eric and Yuri mentioned earlier, he is so helpful to all students. He likes to see things. I remember when, you know, students took a long time to finish their dissertation. Not necessarily that the students are lazy, but because the problems that the students are facing is so difficult, took a long time to get the data and so on. Sid is always saying the best thesis is the finished one. And that encourages many students to speed up, you know, finishing up their thesis and so on. one thing that I also always remember what he said, because all of us basically teaching courses related to quantitative method, techniques, regional science method, and so forth. At the end of the discussion, Sid always reminded the students that models is to be used but not to be trusted. And after that kind of statement, and by the way, he mentioned this every semester at the end of the semester, because he realized that during the semester, students were so busy, was trying to get into the model, get into the mathematical problems and so forth. So he slightly and wisely mentioned that this model is useful, but not to be trusted. So that went very deep in the mind of many students. I know for sure because, like Eric and Kiran, I've been sitting in the same committee for many students in the past. And most of those students are really thankful, and many of them still remind me about what Sid told them about, model is to be used, but not to be trusted and so on. So I don't know what else can I say, but, I'm not exaggerating when I said earlier that one of the reasons why I and my family decided to stay in Ithaca until now, because originally we planned to stay only for extra few years, but we stay at the end until now is about 30 years staying there. Sid and Laurie were really instrumental in our decision. So with that, I cannot think of any memories that I had with Sid, which is not a happy one. Even when we were talking about something that is difficult and something that is problems. So let me end by saying that, a true friend is never truly gone. And to me, Sid is a true friend. And that's why to me, Sid is never gone. So may he rest in external peace. Thank you, Yuri.
Thank you, Iwan. I would like to invite next Professor Tim Mount. Tim, are you ready? Tim is a renowned econometrician and has worked with Sid for a number of econometric projects.
So I first met Sid in the mid 1970s. And you may remember or not that that was a time with the oil embargo by OPEC, and energy was a big issue. And the US solution to this problem was to nuke it. We were going to have electricity that was too cheap to meter. Those were good old days. Anyway, New York planned 7 nuclear power plants. Only 2 were built, and only one of those operated commercially. My colleague, Dwayne Chapman, and I, and a lot of others, said that the industry's projections of growth of demand for electricity were way off. They were forecasting 7% growth forever, and we said it would be about half of that. We should realize that, that we're going through difficult times now, but there were really entrenched opinions, views at that time. Dwayne and I were on a National Academy committee, the Nuclear and Alternative Energy Systems, and we were in the demand group. We were not allowed to consider a scenario where the energy use per capita would go down. That was considered to be completely unrealistic and, more importantly, un-American. Of course, it did go down, but hey, who knows? So with this sort of small contribution in energy forecasting, Sid and Steve Caldwell had an econometric model of New York State that had a demographic component, and I was asked to add an energy piece to that model. so the purpose of this model was to sort of try to predict the state of the state by 1980. And, you know, I suppose we had secret, maybe not so secret aspirations that maybe this model would be adopted as an official state model to forecast what was going on. So the model forecasted that the population in New York State would decline by 1980. This was not a popular forecast in Albany. And as a result, we were not invited to continue our work and model what was going on in the state. And that's what I learned working with Sid, that being correct does not necessarily pay well. So Sid was a real scholar. He wanted to do things correctly. And I wish there were a lot more people like him at Cornell at the moment. But our department has been annexed and become part of a college of business. And it looks very unlikely that that will happen. But I and many others miss Sid. He was a real, as I said before, a real gent. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. I would like to invite next Professor Matthew Drennan. Matt, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Okay, I hope to tell some things that no one knows or remembers. But can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, loud and clear.
First introduced to Sid by Pat Norton at a regional science meeting while I was still at NYU. Now, a few years later, my wife and I has visiting offers at Cornell, me in Sid's department, City and Regional Planning, and her at the law school. After one semester in 1991, we both got permanent appointments at Cornell. Sid was always a supporter for me joining City and Regional Planning. I was there from 91 to 2004 as a tenured professor, and I was always friends with Sid. Walter Izard was also in City and Regional Planning. He had joined that faculty in 1979, I think, departing University of Pennsylvania when that institution had closed down the regional science department at Penn. Sid and I organized a big event for Walter's 80th birthday at Cornell. When Walter brought out a new edition of his book, Methods of Regional Science, with about a half a dozen contributors in 1998, Sid and I wrote the chapter on econometrics. Sid was always a dear friend and a supportive colleague. I do miss him. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Professor Chan Ho John Kim.
Oh, well, thank you, Yuri and Kieran, for organizing this one. I knew of Sid when I was in graduate school, but never met him then. And I began to know him more and heard about him more through his former students, actually Kieran Donaghy, Iwan Aziz, and Yuri, and Eugene Kim. They all gave me full story about how well they were taught by Sid. Finally, I met Sid in Indonesia in a conference, and so for the first time, and I was very, very impressed by his humbleness, speaking very clearly and precisely. And then after that, I met him a number of times. And one particular memory that I cherish, it was that when I arrived in Ithaca for some business, he came to the airport to pick me up. And we had a long chat, and I got to know him much, much better as a colleague, and then cherish our scholarships, talking about models and economics and the use of use of models in planning in the society. So what I came to my mind when I think about Sid is he is the person who speaks complex matters so easy manner and is using layman's language so that we can understand much clearly. That was Sid. Thank you, Yuri, Kieran again.
Thank you, Professor Kim. Next is the regional scientist who almost single-handedly invented the field of spatial econometrics, Professor Luc Anselen.
Hi, it's great to see everybody. Makes me feel old, actually. When I came to Cornell, Sid was the chair of the Department of City and Regional Planning. And coming from Belgium, I really had no clue as to how US academic system worked. And Sid was incredibly helpful in pointing me to what I had to do and by what time and what forms to fill out and things like that. But I have a similar anecdote to Kieran's, and Kieran actually mentioned this when he and Yuri asked me to say a few words, in that during my dissertation defense, I was actually in Ithaca. The third member of my committee, which was not Sid, did not show up. And we were not able to reach him. And Sid was in the office next door, and he just came in and filled in for that person, so that I had the required 3 people there during the defense. And I will not forget that. And after that, I still had some interactions with Sid early on, because he was part of a big team that Walter was putting together to develop this very ambitious multi-regional integrated model, which resulted in 1 or 2 NSF proposals that never got funded. But anyway, there was a lot of interaction around that. And then I have 2, since I left Cornell, I didn't see him that much, but I had 2 very special occasions. And one of them was during the World Regional Science Conference in Jerusalem. And I ended up sitting next to Sid in the bus that toured Jerusalem. And it was just an unbelievable experience. And I learned so much from him, especially walking through the Israel Museum with Sid by my side, pointing to different things, putting things into context. That was just something I will never forget. And then several years later, I did a workshop at Cornell, and Sid was my host. And he would take me around to different places. And he was always talking about his gradual retirement. And only later did I realize what kind of slope he had in mind with that gradual retirement. So I'm very sad to see him go. He's a very fond memory, and I'm glad to have known him as a person. Thank you.
Thank you, Luc. Professor Manas Chatterjee.
My name is not there, but I'm in regional science for many, many years. And then I am a family friend of Sid. My wife and myself went many times when I used to teach, occasionally at Cornell, to his house, and, Laurie and her. And we used to go also sometimes to eat the Indian food, outside. So he was a really gentle person. He was a statistician, myself as a statistician, but he was a different type of statistician. My background is mostly mathematical type. Application is something which I did not know. But he was a person who, taught me the application, particularly the spatial econometrics. I talked to him before. And then he was a very simple person, and he did not talk too much. I mean, he just listened. And also another thing, which is some of you do not know, maybe he was very, very international. You see, he's very international. He gave me a lot of counseling in co-organizing the Indian section of Regional Science Association and the Chinese sections, and also the Northeast section of Regional Science Association, which we had over 20 years, but I have problems to organize after that. And he gave me good counseling about what to do, what not to do, because there are some issues involved in the Indian and the Chinese sections of Regional Science Association. And then the thing is that one very important thing, it is question of the introduction of peace science. Maybe I do not know. He was instrumental in establishing the area of peace science, Walter Isaac. And that was really something. He was very instrumental, although he did not appear that way. He was very influential at Cornell University, and he was very much helpful to Walter Isaac and the peace science at Cornell. And maybe some of you do not know, I work now in the area of peace science for the last 20 years, 25 years. And this is becoming, the peace science is becoming the regional science. I am a student. I also teach at regional science in Pennsylvania, but now peace science is becoming everywhere. And it is the question of the counseling aspect of, Sid Saltzman. And then the question of, knowing the subject. See, I teach production management, this and that, but he knows the subject, his applications, is great. The way he, long time ago, he talked with me about this spatial econometrics, how they can be used. And also, or sometimes we used to teach together. And he told me what not to say to the children, to the student. This was really great. He's a great person. And also, his great soul. He not only involved with the individual, but also he involved with the families, with my children, what they're doing, where they're going, what did they go for. All of them went to Cornell, and I used to go there to see my children, and then they always going to see them, Lord's house. He was very, very, gentleman, very low profile, but he's a great person. I'm very glad that I had the, privilege of knowing such a person. Was very, very international, very, very counseling, very, not talking too much, but he understood a lot. I really, feel very sad about his passing away.
Thank you, Manas. I think among many things, Sid was interested in transportation studies. So I'm going to invite one of the transportation gurus here, Professor David Boyce.
Thank you. When I learned of the passing of Sid Saltzman on December 23rd, 2020, at age 94, I received the news as a tribute for a personal friend. In my remarks, I'll try to say why. Although Sid was 12 years my senior, only in 1968 did he enter the academic field of regional science at the same time as I did. And while I knew his name from that time, it was only in 1986 that we really became acquainted. That was at the Soviet American workshop in the Soviet Union. We were both delegates. Was anyone else there in this group? I don't think so. In fact, we arrived on the same plane a day late. I had been ill for a day, and I took the plane the next day. And somehow Sid missed a plane from Frankfurt to Moscow. So we ended up on the same plane, and that really allowed us to get to know each other. Sid was a friendly guy, but a relatively serious man. We had many discussions during the days of the workshop and compared notes and insights in considerable depth. The actual workshop was in Tallinn, Estonia, which was then a Soviet republic. I recall that Sid and I set out one cold morning about 7 o'clock in the morning to survey the town, ending up at the cathedral. It was all much fun and very interesting, especially his comments. Then I next met him in Cincinnati at the North American meetings in 1995 when we had dinner together. Nearly 10 years had passed, but little had changed between us. We just picked up where we left off. And then I met Sid at the North American meetings in Santa Fe in 1998, just 3 years later. We had dinner together with colleagues and family members, good company and lots of reminiscing. I'm sure I saw Sid in 1999 at Walter Izard's 80th birthday. However, my last memory of him was on April 29th, 2011, when I went to Cornell for the Izard Memorial. I called Sid beforehand. I don't know why I did, but I called him and arranged to have dinner with him on the night before the main event. Sid would have been 85 then, I would have been 73. It was just the two of us. What I recall was that he expressed an interest in how I was doing in Evanston, what my plans were for the future. He said that he lived in a continuing care retirement community in Ithaca. He was very enthusiastic about it in the Saltzman low-key way. Those are my memories of Sid, mostly about having dinner, not about research. He was a serious but friendly fellow, always ready to help others. I miss him a lot.
Thank you, David. Professor Peter Beatty is a historian of regional science. Would you like to share a few words? Peter?
Can't hear you.
Unmute yourself, Peter.
Oh. I think you're still muted, Peter. Oh.
Try raising the volume on your computer, Peter.
You have a microphone volume?
Is the microphone on?
Mic on.
His
I can
microphone
see
is
it.
on. I think he just doesn't have sound on his computer.
Yeah.
Like he's still muted.
Now he's muted again.
You know, you can go to that little button by the mute, the little up arrow, and you can adjust the audio settings on your computer.
Just press once. Okay. Oh, there's no volume.
Peter, you're still on mute according to the sign above your picture. Yeah, you're still, try now.
Computer probably has a microphone volume control.
Yeah, if you look at him in the list of participants, it says that he's unmuted and he has his video on. I think you have to go down to that little button on the left, lower left, where it says mute. There's a little up arrow right next to it. Click on that. Last thing is audio settings on the bottom. And then you can get to your speaker volume, microphone volume.
Well, I think perhaps we should move on. I forget who's the next speaker, Yuri, and then we want to be able to turn things over to Matthew and Lori and Nancy to see if they want to make any comments.
Does Janet want to say a few words? Janet is still muted.
Actually, yeah, I asked you. I didn't know him, so I was just checking in on what was going to be said about him. So I don't really have anything to say. So sorry about that. I'm just I guess, interloper on the session.
Okay. David Plain, would you like to make some remarks?
Sure, I'll just say a word or two, but I didn't know Sid as well as some of you. I'm a native Ithacan, and I went to high school with Matt. I think we were maybe in the same Ithaca high school class, 1972. Sid was somebody, though, that I saw at a lot of North American meetings, and we always had friendly conversations. I think I was on that bus in Jerusalem that somebody mentioned. So he was just somebody that was kind of in and out of my life on a kind of a regular basis. And he was the kind of person that you kind of thought you knew maybe more than you really did, because he was just such a comfortable person to be with. It was like no time had passed from year to year when I would see him. We talked about a few projects together, but we never really worked together. So I don't have a whole lot to contribute in terms of great stories, but he was really someone that, you know, was kind of epitomized what the regional science group is all about. It's just people that you see from time to time in different parts of the world and really have some, you know, common interests with. Just a wonderful, wonderful person, and I will miss him.
Thank you, David.
Pat Hara is somebody from my generation. Pat, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, Yuri. Thank you very much. As Yuri showed, you know, I also learned from this textbook. Very important. And honestly, I was not a good student. I am originally from the hotel school. I took Master Regional Science at Regional Science, and after that, I got the PhD at the hotel school. And quite often, I remember so many people at Cornell ask me, "Do you have a PhD program at the hotel school?" Yes, we do. Anyway, so I took it, and as I told you, I'm not necessarily the best student or good student, but there was only one miracle happened. I think The last year, I went to some conference at the hotel schools. No, I'm somewhere in the National Tourism Conference. And Sid and I got Best Paper Award. So I thought, wow, this is good. Maybe I'll be good. But now I recall that that was the highlight of my academic achievement. So anyway, I really owe him a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted. I will turn the floor to the Saltzman family now. Matt, Nancy, and finally Lori.
Well, of course, I have lots of memories, but the ones I would say are pertinent for this group are among my early memories going to Rand Hall, which was the computing center at the time when he was director of OCS, and getting interested in all of the equipment that was there and so on. And then I was a Cornell undergrad majoring in mathematics, and we couldn't call it then minoring in computer science, but I went on later to think about what to do for a career, and I liked mathematics and computer science, but I didn't like them as conceptual theoretical fields. And so I was talking to him about what might be an interesting thing to do, and he suggested that operations research was a good place to find applications that would motivate me to continue to work in that area. And so I did that, and so I owe him my career. So
can I make a comment?
And
hey, this is Ellen, Ellen Week Saltzman. I need to inject a note of levity here. Sid recruited me to city and regional planning. I was a friend and classmate of his daughter Nancy's, and I was deciding what to do. And he said, oh, you should come over, and you know geology, and you could work with Barclay Jones and all that sort of stuff. So I did. And I even have a publication with Barclay, my first. It was great. And I bargained to get first author on that too. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, long story short, I never completed my degree in city and regional planning because I ran off with Matt, ran off to Pittsburgh, where he was in graduate school. We ended up getting married. I tried to finish my degree remotely. It just didn't work out very well. Sid was not on my committee, obviously would have been a conflict of interest. But anyway, Matt and I are still here 36 years later. And Kieran, I believe you were the person, you were a TA in one of my classes. And many years after you know, all this transpired, Sid said something, and this must have been when you came back to the department. Sid said something about, oh, Kieran Donahue remembers you. And I said, what? I was just like a student in a class. And he says, well, when you run off with the department head's son, people remember. So I'll leave that with you. Sid was a lovely man.
Mm-hmm. Good to see you, Ellen.
Nancy or your mom?
so Nancy? Somebody has to unmute them like this.
Oh, there you go.
Unmute. Yeah.
We're unmuting.
Well, thank you all for putting this together, and all those wonderful memories of which I was sometimes very peripheral, but it was very nice to hear all about it. I have, of course, lots of memories too, including chasing my brother down the hall of Upson when he came over to look at some of the computing stuff and running around and making all kinds of havoc. So yeah, I just want to thank you. And I don't know, did you want to say something? Yeah, this is my husband, Steve Elner, who get into the picture. Is also got career advice from Sid, who was what, chair of the department when we first met?
Yes, yeah, I ran off with the department chair's daughter. That's my connection to this. I will just say thank you to all of you for organizing this. I think you've captured some of what's most important about Sid, which was any room he was in was better for him being there, that he was simply the kindest and most caring person around. And what he cared about more than anything else, I think, was the success of his students and the success of those around him. And it is great and a very fitting memorial to get people together to talk about those things. So, thank you.
Probably most, huh?
Yep.
Lori.
Lori.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Yuri and Karen, for organizing this, and thank you all for your taking the time to join in remembering Sid. We, his family, are grateful for being invited to be with you on this day. Thanksgiving Day, 10 days from now, would have been our 70th wedding anniversary. So I participated in Sid's early journey. Though I met Sid a little later, that I learned that it was to his great surprise that he won the Science Award at his small high school graduation. This may have been the reason that when he enlisted in the Navy after high school during World War II, they sent him to what was called the V-12 program, resulting in a degree in mechanical engineering from Purdue University. That's where that happened. Thus, he started out as what is known as a boilermaker and remained in the Naval Reserve. After the war, continuing his education at night with a master's degree of science in industrial engineering at Columbia, he worked as an engineer in industry. Lastly, as an industrial engineer at Renwall, a toy company, which he really liked. After our marriage and after a second tour of duty in the Navy, this time at sea, in a small minesweeper and injured badly enough in rough seas to be retired from the Navy, he worked at the Royal McBee Company on an early computer for commercial use called the LGP-30, continuing to take courses at Columbia at night in industrial engineering. For reasons that remain obscure, maybe when the work on the LGP-30 was finished and the next project less interesting, when an opportunity to apply for a teaching assistant position at Cornell caught Sid's attention, he applied and was accepted. I liked the idea too, so we happily moved to Ithaca with our children 4 years old and 3 months old. Sid was known to say later that he didn't realize that it also meant that he had to enroll in Cornell Engineering's PhD program. Maybe so. In any case, going back was not going to be an option. So whatever the story, he became a PhD candidate. On completion, he remained as an assistant professor in the engineering college, ending his last 2 years as was stated, as associate director in the Office of Computer Services. I was then involved in my own academic pursuits at Cornell, and we were amused to say that I complained to him about turnaround time on the Cornell's computer. There were no personal computers in those days, and he would wonder on occasion about the turnaround time on the washing machine. Since writing his PhD thesis, having put Professor T.C. Liu, then of Cornell's economics department, on his committee, Sid was gradually coming to the realization that he really was most interested in people, their lives and pursuits. And because of that, how much more interested he had become in economics rather than engineering. Maybe what he knew about engineering and machines, including computers, might be used to help make people's lives better. That is when he came to the College of Art, Architecture, and Planning, and the rest is the history that you know and have heard tonight. Sid loved people. He loved being with people. He loved working with people. Every human being deserved respect and dignity. He especially loved solving problems together for the benefit of all. He hoped that whatever he did in that direction would lead in some small way to a world at peace. How delighted Sid would have been if he could have been with you for this conference. He would have been pleased at all the important problems people from everywhere were working on, using quantitative methods and learning in the process. He would, and his family do, wish you all good fortune in your future endeavors. And we thank you for remembering him. We, of course, always will with boundless love.
Thank you, Lori, for those well-chosen words, most apt.
I have nothing further. That should conclude our session tonight. So enjoy the rest of the evening, everyone.
Thank you, Yuri.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you, Kieran.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.